Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Lieben, and I'm the Risk Management and Training Coordinator here at IRMA. Today is day 2 of our Mental Health Stand-Down Week, and we have presenting Battalion Chief Steve Kahn. He is going to do Rough Seas Ahead, Steering an Organization Through Tough Times. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions that you would like addressed during this presentation, you can put it in the Q&A box and we will read it in real time. If we notice we're getting short on time, we may hold it till the end, but we do want to address them as they come in. So feel free to just type them in there. Also, at the end of this presentation, there will be an evaluation that will be pop up and also emailed to you. We do ask that you fill that out. That helps us determine new topics that you'd like to see or anything else that you would like IRMA to provide, as well as if you have questions that weren't answered that maybe you would like answered, we can also get them to Steve after the presentation is over. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and we're going to get started.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much, Lisa, for the introduction. Thank you to IRMA and the invite to come over. I believe Chief Leidig out of West Chicago was the one who put my name in, and I guess I owe you a beer now for that one. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. When I was asked to do this presentation, this is something I had sort of been mulling around in my mind for a little bit on exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to say. So when I received the invitation here, I thought, well, now is the time to do it. I'm going to put something together. I named this thing Rough Seas Ahead, and I started down this rabbit hole of putting some stuff together. And as I continued, I was trying to find some kind of a little image to, I don't know, convey the idea that we needed to steer a ship through these seas. And I continued down this rabbit hole, as you can see, and I just kept finding image after image after image to identify the types of things that we might feel like we're going through when our organization's going through some bad times. So anyway, here I am, and thank you so much for allowing me the time to present. My name is Steve Kahn. I'm a battalion chief with the Colerain Township Fire Department. We are a department just outside of Cincinnati on the northwest area. In fact, if you're ever coming down from Illinois, from Chicago area to watch the Cubs lose to the Reds, you came right through our area here. So next time, honk when you come through. Thank you for coming through. But that's where we are. We're a little smaller department. We have 5 stations, make about 15,000 runs a year. And like any other organization, we've had our trials and tribulations over the years, dealing with some rough seas and things that have impacted our organization. So just a few things of what to expect. I'll give you a little bit more introduction onto me and why I'm doing what I'm doing here. We'll do this presentation. I'll try not to kill everybody by death by PowerPoint, but there's some good points I think here that I want to try to get out, and we'll discuss some of these things. I might have a little story time about some history stuff that I like, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some interaction, maybe some conversation to talk about some of these things that I brought up here. And with that, just like any other talk or topic, you have to have a couple disclaimers. This is just an informational presentation here, just to try to get some ideas out there to help our organization workplace viability in times of stress. I'm not trying to make policy here or anything like that. I'm not receiving any compensation for this, and there's no conflict of interest if I happen to mention any products. I do represent Colerain Township Fire Department and also a local Cincinnati hospital because I am a registered nurse. But at times when I talk about some of my work experiences, I might sound kind of critical, but I don't want people to think that I'm really getting down or I'm not condemning an organization. We learn from our past, right? So we have to identify something, and if we have identified something, we can then work on fixing things, and hopefully that's what we've done over the years. And my last little disclaimer here is, in today's day and age, I try to utilize and be as inclusive as I can. but sometimes the old school still catches up to me, and I call my crew. I will call them my guys, and please, there's no intention here at all to alienate or offend anybody, but my guys is simply all my people that I have working with me and on my teams. So with that, here I am. My name is Steve Kahn. My first and foremost, I identify myself as a husband. I've been married to a wonderful woman for 31 years. She is also a critical care nurse, does open heart surgeries on children's at our local children's hospital. We have two great kids. My son's a cyber encryption engineer for a government agency. He's married to a cardiac transplant nurse. My daughter is a critical care nurse living up in New York with her Marine Corps captain. Hopefully he'll be discharged soon and coming home. And like I said, I've been a battalion chief for about 8 years, but I've been a firefighter for 38 years. I started off as a volunteer, went through the part-time ranks. I've been working currently 30 plus years here for the Coleraine Fire Department, looking at some type of retirement, hopefully here in the future. And and as I mentioned, I've also been a critical care nurse for over 30 years. I work in a cardiac cath lab where we do stents and pacemakers, and just like any type A personality, even on my downtime, I'm working a high stress job. So with these jobs, you can see how I may have come across some types of rough seas and some organizational grief at times. So what I like to talk about is leaders. I love leadership. I love identifying leaders, and I love identifying what makes a leader strong and what makes a leader weak or where they could improve. And I think we have some great examples throughout history. We have Sun Tzu with his art of war and talking about identifying the enemy and the adversary, and that's one of his lesser known quotes there. But when you think about leadership through tough times, and you can read some of his sayings through the art of war, it really is applicable to today's day and age. Then we've got Nelson Mandela. That goes without saying, everything that he was able to do through his lifetime, through his imprisonment, and come out and continue to lead. What are these guys doing right? What are these guys doing wrong? Like Ralph here in the bottom right, that's Ralph from The Lord of the Flies. This young man was thrust into a position that he may not have been ready for. So what did he do wrong? What did he do right? We know what happened on the island as we went through. It's a great example. The book is a great example of an exploration of leadership and the different types of leadership as these young men were experiencing life on a deserted island. Um, like I said, the purpose of this presentation is to identify and raise awareness. Like individuals, organizations can experience loss, and this loss can be as a business, it could be a a loss of an organizational unit, a loss of a business unit, fiscal downturns, and things of that nature. But when I think of loss in terms of my personal experiences with police, fire, public works, and things of that nature, I think about death. I think about losing a public employee in the line of death, whether it's a police officer, firefighter line of duty, or even a public works or someone that gets struck on the roadway. These types of things can really impact an organization. And when an organization goes through something like this, it's imperative that our leaders are ready and can lead our departments through these troubled times. So I'm going to try something new here, and I hope it works. As I was going through this last night, my wife said, people are going to be doing this on their phone also. And I didn't think about that. But hopefully, if you're sitting in front of a computer, I am going to put some stuff up here, a program called Slido. And if you could scan that QR code and just answer a couple of these questions, this might give me a little bit of an idea of who is all out there in the audience. And hopefully this will work. This is the first time I've used it. I did use it at home and it seemed like it worked okay. But there we go. So, what's nice about this is it gets real time information out there that I can see exactly who I'm working with. Like Obviously we've got some government employees out here, some administrative, fire and EMS tend to be the bigger groups that are in on this mental health kick, that per se, if you want to call it that. But this gives us, about 80-20% there. So, and then what types of populations are we serving? I think this is kind of neat also, just to, I live and work in an area that's about 65,000 people. And I know that when you think about places like Chicago, they've got well over a couple million. So those types of things are, it's interesting to me to see the types of people, the types of services they're providing and their type of populations, and then realize that we're all pretty much in the same boat because we all do the same types of things and we can all experience the same things. So with that, and then just in one word, what types of crises may have your organizations encountered? And it could be something like a death of a valued employee, a death, maybe a cancer or a sudden death, or maybe a line of duty death. And these are the types of things, suicide, and those are the big ones. Our deaths, our suicides, and obviously, just a little bit of my background. That's why I'm doing this. I've experienced multiple suicides over my career, and I can't take any more, basically. And we're trying our darndest to try to bring this awareness of mental health and how to lead our people when they need to be led. Sometimes they don't know they need to be led, and we have to. That's when they really need it. Okay. So again, I thought it was just a neat little tool here to use, and we might use this throughout a little bit more here. And then, how well did your organization do while going through the crisis? How well was it led? How well did you come out on the other side? And this is interesting because there are some that just come through these things extremely well, others that struggle and takes a long time. When you go through grief, it's not one of those things that you can just go through and get over in a couple days, a couple weeks, even a couple months. Sometimes when we're talking about organizational recovery after something like this, it can take up to years. And I'll give you an example of that as we get through this. So hopefully you're not going to fall asleep here, but I am going to talk a little bit about some theory, because that will help us in terms of understanding a little bit further on down the way here. Relax. There's no test. I'm just going to talk about a couple different things about grief and loss and leadership. So back in 1969, there was a Swiss physician. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she developed a model of grief and recovery, and recognized that humans go through these 5 stages of grief, and you've probably heard about them: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And she was able to take this model and this framework and put individuals and their behaviors and their emotions. She was able to put those into these 5 categories and recognize that this is a process that everybody has to go through. This has stood the test of time, but by putting it as a framework and a process, it provides this visual and a conceptual model that shows over time that there is a way out, that this, as the process continues, there's always time, always continues, and is going to be able to get this way out. If we take that and we extrapolate that into maybe some organizational type issues, we can see that some writers have actually gone as far as to expand this to 7 to 9 stages, what they call transformational change, after some type of a tragedy or whatever. So we're going to take a look at those, and we'll talk about each one of those stages as they relate to an organization. Then we're also going to, we're going to start here with John Maxwell. John Maxwell has this. He's just obviously he's one of these leadership gurus. And years ago, he came up with this program called the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And we're gonna take a look at just a few of these and see how we can key in on those as we lead our organizations through something like this. that whole statement about ignorance of the law is no excuse. We just because you don't know that these laws are out there, you're probably practicing some of them, but there's probably some out there that you hey, maybe you can use some brushing up on. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at some of these and um, just brushing up on some of these, just some of the concepts here. Some of these are very obvious, and we could probably, in terms of this presentation, and in terms of um, yeah, the organizational grief and leading through these tough times, we can probably find some way in each one of these 21 different areas to improve. But in the manner of time here to try and keep things too not too long, we're going to just talk about a few of them here. So as I look at these, think about Maxwell when he came up to these. He says that an organization, when an organization is in chaos, everybody has a plan to fix it. The firefighters out there know that every morning when you come in and have your cup of coffee, we sit out there and we stand around the bumper and we fix every single problem in our department, in our towns, in our state, our government, the world, right? We fix everything. But it takes a leader of real understanding to straighten things out. So these leaders have to be able to understand the processes, why things are happening, the way that they're happening, and have some strategies there to lead them out of those things. So he came through these, and as he was developing these 21 laws, eh, these aren't based on culture, age, country, or gender. These are all inclusive and they apply to any community, any group. They're recognized as laws by other leaders, other leadership gurus have used these laws and have been able to work within these frameworks, and they stand the test of time. So, law number four, navigation. The whole program is called Steering Through These Rough Seas, and we have to have somebody that can steer with vision. Anybody can steer a ship. And if you've been in some of these situations and you might have a strong personality that might start rallying the troops, but if they're not in line with the organizational vision, then you can see division start happening. We need somebody at the helm that can set the course, has the vision, knows where they want to get to, and have a plan to get there. And they have to draw on past experiences. That's a big key for me. We see in today's day and age, we have some of these young up and comers that are absolutely phenomenal in their knowledge and in their hands-on skills and things of that nature. But they may have some shortcomings in their that slide tray of their past experiences. We need somebody that has the experiences, that knows the good and the bad and how to get through things. We're looking for leaders that can connect. We'll talk a little bit here in the future that the human touch means a lot. Now, whether that's virtual or actually touch, but leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand, before they start doing anything. And we have to have leaders that have connected with their workforce and with their teams. They live their message. They've been able to embody their values, their objectives, and they live them, not just pound them into people's heads. People will do what people see. So if they get the picture of what's going on, so if our leaders can live that life that they're trying to accomplish, if they're trying to live through those goals and live their values, our teams are going to see that, and they will do the same thing. They will imitate what they're seeing, and that leader helps to be able to provide that big picture. They do what's right, and by doing that, along with some of these other laws about connecting with our people, they realize that our leaders will be authentic leaders, and they are there to provide that authentic leadership and transformation. We'll talk a little bit about this as we in the future. I'm going to mention Winston Churchill about victory. Leaders find a way to win. They have a vision of where they want to get to, and anything less than success is unacceptable. Now, there is a little bit of a fault to this. If you're one of those that are, if you're going down and the ship is almost underwater and you're still bailing with a teacup, you know, there comes a point where things become futile, but the drive and determination of victory is huge. We don't want a leader that's going to give up too quickly. Number 16, the big mo is momentum. When an organization starts to bog down and is as long as they're still moving, we can capitalize on that. But it's hard to get a organization back moving after it has stopped. So if something happens with some tragedy happens, it's very easy for everybody to give up and just sort of like just wander or just meander through things and just become stagnant. Our leaders need to keep that momentum up, and just like a snowball or like a train. Once that momentum starts going, we can build it. It becomes tougher to stop, and at some point in time, it becomes unstoppable. That's where we want to get to. And on top of it, leaders have to be able to understand, have that self awareness that they are going to probably have to sacrifice something. They might give up some time with their families. They might have to, they might give up on a goal or something for their business unit that they were wanting to accomplish, maybe through an accreditation or something like that. They might have to put some things on hold in order to lead our people through some of these things. So this is where I come in. In 2009, I graduated with my master's in organizational leadership and dynamics. We had had a double line of duty death a couple years earlier, and I did my thesis on our recovery and how did our department do on the mental health aspects of addressing our firefighters and their families through something like this. How did we do addressing these needs? And what I found is that I started seeing these multiple issues come out that were directly affecting the organization. Anger, we had morale issues. People had these blurred lines of responsibilities. We had a suicide a couple years afterwards. And as I was going through this, I started thinking, I wonder, just like humans, I wonder if an organization goes through the same types of steps or the same types of processes that Kubler-Ross theorized with her stages of grief. An organization is a living, breathing entity. And I think that you could probably identify some areas in performance or in other metrics, how we can identify where an organization is in recovery. And is this an important thing? I think so. Some estimates say that some estimates are they think up to $75 billion a year are wasted due to dysfunctional organizational recovery. That's the spinning of the wheels and ineffective leadership getting through these things. And what makes this really, really tough and difficult is that as I'm talking about an organization, and as it's an organization it is a living, breathing entity. It's made up of living, breathing humans. And each one of these individuals is probably going through a grief process or a process of loss at their own time also. So you might have several people that are at different points on this continuum. And how do we identify that, recognize that, and lead our crews and our teams through that? So if we take Kubler-Ross and we sort of apply it to our organizations, and we have these same, I did 7 stages here: shock and denial, pain and guilt. You can see them on the left. This is our emotional response to a crisis. This is not our performance or the grief recovery performance. It comes out a little bit differently than this. This is our emotional responses. So, you can see how initially when something happens, you lose that key member of your organization, or it could even be, your tax levy fails or your funding sources dries up and you no longer have that. You can have that shock and denial. People's emotional responses, they become anxious. They can become very passionate about things. And you can see how the emotions can go up and down until you get to that point on number 4 where they look desperate. They just look bad. Where does the leader need to be at this point? They need to be up front and center, visible, right there, helping right along the way. So simply telling our members that everything's going to be okay, it's not enough. And research proves this. As our little friend there in the right says, yeah, this is fine. Place is burning down. You can't have those blinders on. You have to be able to get in there and help out. So here we go. Number one, questioning the shock and denial. Is this really happening? We're way too good to have something like this happen. So that emotional response is you might have actual confusion, you might have performance and productivity issues, or you may have key workers in there that they turn that anxiety into a work, and they actually may have an increasing in productivity. This can be a very confusing time. Again, remember though that organizations are made up of people at different points in this process. Um, hopes can be pinned to short-term solutions. So you might see some real quick policies, procedures, something happen real quick that's going to lead us right through, but they're usually a flash in the pan and they rarely hold up. At this point, you might even see some increased use of sick time. You might see people coming in late, some tardiness issues, maybe leaving early. But these types of things, as long as we're aware of them, we might be able to start saying, okay, well, maybe John might need some help with something, or maybe, Susie, maybe we can talk with her, and maybe their families are having some issues. So again, that comes in with that connection that Maxwell talks about. Number two, we have this pain and guilt. A lot of people feel like maybe they could have done more, they could have helped out more. Um, People are compassionate people, they're empathetic people, and this can really raise their anxiety, and this emotional response can really go through the roof. Emotions could be really, really high, and people could be on edge. You could see arguments, you could see God forbid, you could see fights between people, between unit days. I tell you, we saw it between our unit days and the ones before and after, right? As firefighters, we always know that the crew right before us is the laziest crew out there. They do nothing, and we do everything for the crew that follows us, right? Um, at this point in time, people can be very, very, very touchy, and that's where you can have fights and arguments and over petty stuff, like somebody not filling the salt shaker, right? Anger and bargaining, as our emotions start to dip and they start coming down, we start seeing high levels of frustration. These unpredicted and unexpected happenings may require some type of a different strategy to come through this than you would have normally done. We may see this increased conflict, um, increased use of sick time again, continued low morale. One of the things we have to be careful of is discipline. If we see people that are increased use of sick time or their performance is suffering, some things may definitely qualify for discipline. There's obviously areas where things discipline needs to happen, but be careful with that, because you don't want to get to the point where the idea that the beatings will continue until morale improves. We can't beat uh, things. We can't beat our people into submission to get through this. We have to keep moving. We have to keep things in perspective, and that's where the leaders come in to constantly give that the vision of things will get better. Keep on this continuum. Again, with the big mo, I think it's number 16 from Maxwell. If we don't keep moving, we're going to stay angry. We're going to stay stuck. Churchill says, if you're going through hell, keep moving. You don't want to stop when you're in hell. Subversive behavior. This is kind of something that's kind of interesting. Subversive behavior is not uncommon. I know in our situation, we lost 2 firefighters as a result of a basement floor, or the first floor collapsed into a basement. We had a very proper investigation being conducted by our internal panel, but we had some sideline independent investigations by individuals because they felt that we might be holding something back, or they felt that they knew more than what the committee was going to find. So sometimes you have to wrangle these things in. Um, we might have new policies and new trainings at this time. And, again, we know that at some point in time, we're going to see a dip. We're going to see a dip in performance and things of that nature. Like when we get to stage 4 here with despair, depression, we start saying things like, if only we could have ABC, if only we had done this. When we say things like this, we're living in another time. We're not living now. We have to understand that this is where we are right now, and this is what we have to do to get out of it. We don't want our employees to give up, and we have to address it. This our mental health of our employees are, our employees are our number one resource, right? We have to have good safety nets. We have to have good resources and processes in place to ensure the health of our employees, and that continues or includes the mental health. Peer support programs are huge in the fire service right now. And I think we're starting to see some police and other areas. I know some hospitals are getting into the area of peer support to try and address these stressors on our people. We might see a lack of connectivity or collaboration. Again, this goes along with some of those independent type investigations to find out what's wrong. And like I said, Maxwell, the big Mo, if we've stopped moving, we got problems. But this is a pivotal point. When our people, when their emotional reserves are at an absolute low, this is actually where we need to step in and provide active steps to pull us out of this depression. And we'll have a couple examples as we get through this. As we start to make this upward turn, we start getting some increased emotional reserves. We might enter this period of calmness and relaxation. People start to accept more. They start to accept the situation. They might be more open-minded to some of these policies that maybe you've held off on because you see some benefit to one of these policies. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to hold off until the time is right. Well, this is the time. This is the time we want to start putting things out there to go forward. Having a clear vision at this time will focus that energy. They'll consolidate the efforts and move towards a better future. But also the exact opposite is true. We have to steer the ship at this point in time. Reconstruction and working through. We're going to try a few things, right? We're going to try some policies. We're going to try some activities. We're going to try a few things here that that we think might work. So we're going to experiment. We're going to try some things. We're going to try to maintain this forward momentum, and that's where the trust that we have established, hopefully a long time before, we will have established that trust, and our team members are going to follow us because we have that trust. We're going to empower our employees. One of the big things is to let our employees drive and steer the ship as long as you're providing that navigation. Okay, we want like the one slide said, anybody can steer it. The leaders have to provide the direction. So we can let them steer, let them have input. And the idea that there is no failure here, just feedback. Some things you're going to try may not work. Some things may have opposite reactions, but it's not a failure. We just learn from it. It's feedback. At this point in time, if we don't have that trust and we don't have that forward momentum, fear could come back and take over and undo everything. And then hopefully we're going to get to this acceptance and hope. Authentic transformation begins with grief. So we've had this thing happen. We've suffered this sense of loss, and we know at the end we're going to have some type of an authentic transformation. We will accept the new normal, and we will have this hope and possibilities that things are going to be better. And where we start getting into this new normal, the future, we'll have policies that are integrated into the business. We'll have increased engagement. But one of the things we have to do as leaders, we have to give ourselves the grace to feel what we're thinking and what we're feeling. One thing I haven't really mentioned at this time before now is that we've been focused on our individuals and our organization, but we're people too. We suffer as well. We have to give ourselves grace and we have to, at times we have to show our own vulnerability and say, you know what, we're with you. I'm with you. I'm going through this with you. Don't make this about you. Make this about us. We are going through these things together. At this point, we've chosen to agree to get better, and we're going to celebrate this journey. We're going to celebrate that we've weathered the storm, and we're going to be better afterwards. Okay. So where does all this steering come along? And who do you want steering the ship? Do you want the steely-eyed guy that's focused? He is not wavering. He knows where he's going. Or do you want someone who's just sort of letting go of the wheel at times and looks like he's kind of like hyped up on something? Anyway, so we have to be aware of grief. We have to be willing to accept the pain and the loss and take these actions to let go of the past, and then to find new meaning from the experience. Prolonged levels of this uncertainty can prolong this entire process of weathering the storm, and this whole thing about the organizational recovery. So keep in mind that this is a process. Change starts with identifying the potential for impact. And what I mean by this is we can know now, just anticipate, have this high index of suspicion that if something happens to one of our members, if something happens to our organization, our funding stream, or whatever, we can identify and have a pretty good index of suspicion that something is going to suffer. And we prepare for that now. We start building that trust in our leaders, in the organization. One thing we want to stay away from is institutional betrayal, because at some points, some people might feel like the institution has betrayed. If we have that organizational trust and we are living and breathing our values and our commitment to our people, they will have that trust. Leaders can display their personal vulnerability. We have to remember that our leaders are humans. We're not robots, and we suffer just along with everybody else. But letting our crews know and our people know that we're suffering and going through this means a lot as well. Let people miss what was lost. This is kind of weird because, and I'll just use some example, that when we had a suicide several years ago, and because of the stigma that of what suicide is, there are a lot of emotions that come along with it, religious perceptions and stigmas and things that surround suicide. We were not allowed to grieve him. We weren't allowed to have a little memorial for him. We weren't allowed to put a bench out there because of what he did. And that may be old school, but we have to allow our people to miss what was lost. If you lose somebody, if you lose that funding stream, you know what? People are going to feel it. Let them talk about it. Let them recognize the loss and maybe even create some of these organizational rituals. Like say something, I'm sorry, Lisa, did you have something?
Yep, we actually do have a question.
Oh,
Wanting to know, who should lead? Meaning, like, do you just take the person who steps up or a shift commander, or does the organization just allow someone who steps up to lead or steer?
well, I think that's a good question. And actually, I have an example, sort of what not to do coming up here in just a second, because um, the best answer is our leader, right? If you think about, I always go back to General Patton. General Patton gets up and he gives the Third Army this rousing speech of, "Hey, you guys are getting your butts kicked. Let's get back out there and do this," right? Um, I have another example coming up here about King Henry V. You know, we're going to go out there and we're going to kick butt, and I'm going to be right along with you. If a sergeant had gotten up, he might have been able to rouse his own unit, but to get the entire organization, we really need to have these leaders front, center, and present, and I don't want to say suffering, but going right along with this. And I think that that answers some of Tim's questions there. We're going to have individuals that are going to step up, and especially if the leader, the boss, doesn't step up, somebody needs to. And if we don't have that strong leader, then things can falter. The best answer is have an organization that accepts the possibility that something like this could happen and is ready to take on the challenge. And if the chief is, let's say, my God, let's say it's God forbid the chief is the one who's is lost, or we lose them for some reason or another. Um, the next person in line. We need those. We need to know that we're being led by somebody who is competent and can step up and has the influence over everybody. Does that sort of answer that?
Yes, I think it does.
Okay, cool. Some of the things they talk about is create an organizational trust. I'm sorry, create this organizational ritual to recognize and remember the loss, like maybe a memorial or a scholarship, um, pictures of the individual. Be careful not to overdo this. And the reason I say that is we don't, and I'll just use again, I can just speak from my experiences. We lose two firefighters, and it's so easy to put their picture everywhere. But at some point, when those pictures are absolutely everywhere, it almost looks like it sort of becomes a funeral home. We want to have them in the appropriate places. We want our people to remember, but not to dwell. We want our people to remember, but not be constantly reminded, and because that sort of brings about a just a bad reminder every time you turn around. So we have to be very careful about this. So it's very easy at the beginning to have this flood of emotions where people are putting things out. But at some point, let's scale some things back and make an appropriate memorial or an appropriate remembrance. So, like I said, this is a process. We need to make sure that our leaders have awareness of what's going on. That there's an awareness that we potentially, or the possibility exists, that we could end up in some bad spots. Vulnerability. We want our leaders to have that vulnerability, show that they're vulnerable, and that they're hurting right along with everybody. The empathy and the compassion. We don't want to invalidate somebody's emotions. One of the articles I read, this is all coming on the heels of COVID, where everybody's organization was thrown into disarray, especially in the private sector, where so many people were being sent to work from home. And somebody makes a comment that they wish, they're going crazy working from home. They want to go back to the office. And somebody says, "Oh, you're crazy. Yeah, it's much better now compared to back then." When you say something like that, you've invalidated their emotions. We got to be very careful when someone says something like that. Maybe they're meaning, "I really miss my fellow workers. I miss being there with them." Organizational grace is basically this leadership and the organization living our values. Our personal and our organizational values are being put into action. We're identifying the human need and we're answering it. Like I said earlier, something about, we feel the heart first. The power of the human touch cannot be undervalued. There is a difference from an organization, from a leader. There's a difference between asking, "What can I do?" and showing up at somebody's house with a gallon of ice cream and a box of Oreos. When you do that, you're telling that person, "I'm here for you. I'm here with you. I'm in here with you." There was an example of a worker whose husband had passed away, and instead of saying, "I'm here for you. What do you need?" One of the coworkers shows up at the house with tickets for a movie for the kids, a day at the spa for her, and an offer to babysit and take the kids to the movie. Those are the types of things that show people that we're connected with them and that we care. A simple message saying, "I'm here for you. We can talk," and just keep your head up, and just that virtual touch cannot be undervalued. We want people to understand that. Um, every time I hear the word grace, I always think of Christmas Vacation. Um, she passed away 30 years ago. So we hear a lot about resilience. So on this next thing here, in your own words, maybe one or two or three words, if you can think of something, give me an example of what you think resilience is. What is your example of resilience in your own words? And we can talk about that because there's usually a common theme that comes out. If it's working or not. But so one of the common things that a lot of people will say, here we go, persevere. Yeah, I guess I forgot to actually mention that um, if any of these answers that are being put up here is they're totally anonymous. I have no idea who's talking or who's typing anything. I've got one answer here: the ability to rebound from challenges. Yes, you're persevering, you're rebounding, you're bouncing back. One of the examples a lot of people say is um, bouncing back. So if we use that, one of the examples that gets used is the example of a bouncing ball. There's a gentleman named Mike Sherman. Michael Sherman. He's an Army resilience master trainer. He's got a degree in sports psychology. It's for these major league teams who they lose one week and they have to get back on the field. And how do they get pumped back up? How do they persevere and overcome that loss to get back out on the field? He's been able to transfer that to military thinking. If one of your military units has been, suffered a loss, suffered a defeat, how do we get our soldiers back out there to continue fighting? And one of the things they found in the military when they talk about resilience is this idea that you take a ball and you drop it. And people say you take the ball and then the ball bounces, and that's resilience. Well, anyone, as you can see here on this slide, anybody here can see that that ball doesn't come back up to you. So really the idea of resilience isn't just bouncing back or persevering, getting through it. The idea of resilience is coming out better on the other side from that experience. So resilience is not just a ball bouncing, but coming back past your hand. If you do no work to it, you just drop that ball, it's not coming back to you. You have to put effort into it to get it back to your hand. And if you put enough effort into it, it will actually come back up past your hand. That's what we're looking for in resilience. We want that ball to bounce back higher and better. And in order to do that, it takes work. It takes recognition. It takes vulnerability. It takes somebody to put in some work. And an organization is no different. If we have the leadership teams in place that can attack and identify these things, we can get better in the long run. Again, you can see on this little graph, time continues. You can see there is a way out. There's a process here. And that's what we're looking for with resilience. So we have a little bit of story time and we'll wrap some things up as I continue to start to ramble here. I mentioned King Henry V. Here's an actual picture of him taken in 1415. He gave a speech to his 6,000 English troops as they were facing 25,000 French troops. He gave a speech that encouraged his men. He said, if we're marked here to die, he calls ourselves a band of brothers. He's basically saying, I'm here with you. I'm up front. And if we're going to die, I'm dying with you. If for he that shares his blood with me shall be my brother. We are in this together to the end. He had such a rousing speech. Now, I realize this is Shakespeare's version of it from 1599, but his speech encouraged these men and roused these men to where they killed 10 times the amount that they lost. That is that transformational, stepping out front, showing his vulnerability. Hey, I'm scared. I'm going to die too. If I die, I'm with my brothers. Abraham Lincoln, we always think about his Gettysburg Address, but a lot of people don't realize that that was just really just a mistake. that everyone remembers this address. He was really there just to dedicate the cemetery. They had an orator there named Edward Everett who spoke for over 2 hours. He was the one everyone was supposed to remember. He said 13,000 plus words. Lincoln gets up, speaks for 2 to 3 minutes, uses 272 words, but he uses some key phrases. We're in a great civil war. He recognizes and identifies and acknowledges that what we're going through is absolute hell. What we're going through is devastating. And that, but there is unfinished business. He gives the idea that we will finish this business and we will have a new birth of freedom. So this little insignificant 2 to 3 minutes is a lasting legacy that we remember Abraham Lincoln for. He was able to stir a nation to hold on to itself. He wasn't going to let things slip and split. We were going to get through this war, and he was able to hold things together. Winston Churchill's kind of a neat subject here because he was an absolutely uh, horrible leader at first. And if we think back about Maxwell's different laws, number 15, I think it was 15, is the one about victory. If you hold on to that idea that we will win at all costs, he had this idea, and he said, "I'm not going to lose. I am just going to keep going." Well, that made him a horrible leader in 1922. He was unwilling to give up on some of his fights that were absolutely a lost cause. But during World War II, that tenacity changed. That tenacity changed the will of the people, and he was able to stir that country into being successful and victorious at the end of the war. And there are two quotes here. If not for Hitler, Churchill would be remembered as a failure, even if he was remembered at all. I don't think a lot of people remember that. And that he didn't change. This is the same person. The circumstances changed, and he was able to be victorious. So I'll give a real life example. I was talking to a friend of mine, being in the fire service and being able to travel. I've made friends all over the country, and going to the National Fire Academy, you meet people from all over the world. And I ran into a guy, and we were talking about some of this stuff about uh, challenges and grief, and how does your organization get through some of these things. And he was telling me about his department. It was a fairly young department. They had this visionary leader. This chief was a young guy and was making changes, and he was putting them on the map. They were a leader in their area, even though they had a huge department nearby. This little department was the one everybody came to. The media came to them for everything because they were open. They were accessible to the public, and they were a very professional example of what a fire department was supposed to be. They suffered a devastating line of duty death, and they had this big ceremony, the funeral and everything. And within 3 to 4 days after the funeral, the boss went on vacation. The talk was, "You guys are going to be fine. We've set all this stuff up. You're going to be great. You're going to be fine." And he left for a few weeks. Now, my friend was saying that this is that General Patton moment, that we needed General Patton up there in the front to lead us, to rouse us, to be visible and live this with us. And their boss was gone. And he said that it took them a long time to get through that struggle of the trust. They didn't have that trust anymore in their boss because he wasn't there anymore. He wasn't there when they were going through the worst time of their life. And that's why I'm doing this, is because we can't be doing that. We have to be there, and we have to live up for our people. So to finish this up, I have a challenge for everybody. I can't tell you how many times I said the word leadership, but it takes solid leadership to lead through tragedy. We can talk about servant leadership, and what does leadership mean? There's all these different kinds of leadership theories. Robert Greenleaf has the actual definition and coined the term servant leadership. It's kind of a sleepy time when I start reading it. So basically, Servant leaders set people up so they can thrive. And if they thrive, the organization thrives. Plain and simple. So let's use golf as a metaphor for bad leadership from one of the best movies of all time. We're talking about Caddyshack. If you remember in Caddyshack, there's a time when Chevy Chase and his caddy are out on the green, and Chevy Chase, they're talking about life, and he says something about, be the ball. Everybody wants to be the ball. If you think about that, that became a mantra back in the 80s and 90s about be the ball. If you think about the ball has it's got sponsors' names on it. Everybody watches the ball. That's where all the attention, the focus, it gets to go places. If I'm playing golf, my ball goes to the beach, it goes in the ocean, it goes in the lakes, it goes in the woods, but it gets to travel places. Look at all the dimples. There's a lot of science that goes into this and all the glory that this thing gets because people are watching it. But think about that ball. That ball doesn't go anywhere without the support of a tee. The tee is simple, it's unassuming, humble, tiny, probably forgotten, but it provides lift, direction, elevation, support, all the things a leader should be doing. So if you think about servant leadership as a T and how we should be acting as leaders, that's where our mission, our values, that's how we said we have to live our values. They're going to, our employees, our team members are going to mimic what they see us living our values, us giving the directions and putting that vision and the directions in play. That's what the golf tee does. And it allows that ball, our employee, to go and to soar. So here's an example. I'm pretty sure not one of these people here is taking a look at the golf tee. They're looking at that ball. Where did that ball go? But remember, that tee is going to be picked up by that golfer, be put in his pocket, and it's going to go right where the ball is. So if you set your people up to thrive and to go forward, you'll go forward with them. So here's your challenge. I challenge everybody to be a leader, stand up and do what's right. Do the right thing for your people. And sometimes that requires some sacrifice. Be vulnerable. Show them that you're in a fight with them and you're in this long haul with them. You have to make some changes. I challenge you to make some changes. So I'll just give you an example of what this means to me. Back in 1999, I had this tall, lanky, goofy looking guy came to work and did a ride along with me on the paramedic unit because he was thinking about getting into the fire service. The next year, he got hired as a part-time firefighter. His buddy, another tall, lanky guy, he started working here. They were both my firefighters. I was their lieutenant, I was their captain, and now they are my chiefs. I was so proud when they got promoted because I didn't make them promoted, but I think I gave them something along the way that allowed them to soar. I gave them the opportunities. I gave them some backing. I gave them tools and experiences that they had that they were able to succeed. So when I first heard this idea about being a T and supporting your people, it was at the National Fire Academy in 1997. The instructor gave me a golf tee, and I took that and I taped it up underneath my helmet. Now, over the past 30 years, I've been able to use, I've gone through multiple tees. I've burned some, I've broken some, I've lost some, but I've always had a golf tee taped underneath my helmet. This one here it's just simple. It's on there with some duct tape. It's broken, but it's on there. And when I put my helmet on, that's my reminder to always stand up and do what's right for my people and to give them the support that they need. So I usually give out golf tees when I do my talks, and I challenge our people to be the tee. Don't be the ball. I challenge you to be the tee. And if your organization's going through some tough times, be that tee, lead them through this, help them succeed. And it makes a much better organization in the long run. So with that, I am done. Um, that's my little talk. I know I do talk kind of fast, but I appreciate everyone that's on here. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Well, we did have Chief Lydig post something, and I was actually, because of the length of it, I was gonna allow him to talk. So we're gonna try to see um if his mic opens up and let him know that he can speak. Um, but I don't know if he is able to do that. Otherwise, he was just speaking of, allowing, he had an incident that turned out positive. There was 3 members of an extremely close shift that involved in a mayday. However, there were many questions of what happened, circumstances surrounding the incident, and the fire chief set the tone, allowing some closed in-house discussion and then opening it up to mutual aid responders to learn from that. And that developed into, 3 firefighters developing a program and taking it statewide, learning from what happened and what each member experienced. So again, I think it's more talking. Chief, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, I stepped away for a moment. I was waking up from Steve's lecture.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Pinch him, wake him up.
Actually, I was looking for my golf tee, and I don't know where the darn thing is. I had it here because I was going to hold it up for you to show I got it.
Well, I'll be back in October. I'm going up to Rockford. I'll have to bring some through.
Awesome. Yeah, my question about the steering thing, it was just interesting to hear the perspective on it, and if when in charge, be in charge kind of thing.
Right.
So when we had our Mayday incident that involved a shift of 3 of the closest members you've ever dreamed of having. Their lieutenant was off during the event or the incident, and to watch the organization go through that. I will say there's no class in the world that prepares you to see 3 of your members broken in an emergency room, getting treated and all that kind of stuff. But the aftershock of the fire service eats its own is just amazing. And our chief, who is very progressive in my mind, takes the organization and said, hey, we're gonna discuss this in-house, and then we're gonna break it out a little farther to in-house the other shifts to hear, so you get it right from the horse's mouth and you can ask the questions. Well, when we broke it out to the surrounding organizations that came in to assist us at that fire, it was literally a bloodbath. Fingers pointing, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did the other thing wrong, to the point of people are ready to go. I mean, it was go time, especially coming into a truck house and doing that kind of stuff. And it really took a calm hand at the helm to lead it. And then Chief did exactly what you just recommended, Steve. Take a step back, get everybody organized, and then these 3 blue shirts and their lieutenant took it out on the road to surrounding departments to teach not only what the incident was, how they handled the incident, but more importantly, what they experienced in their days off and how they came together. And actually their resiliency once they got out the other side was just amazing. I mean, they just got their message out. Obviously telling their story was part of the healing process. I know you went through a Mayday yourself, and it made them stronger, I believe, a better shift, and they were able to get their message out there, of the message that you're saying. Hey, you got to talk about this stuff, and you got to say, it's like Pat Kenny says, you ask a fireman how they're doing. Good, everything's great.
Fine.
And that's where the quarter drops. And it's not that. What's going on in your world? How's things? And when the firefighter that was actually I'll say trapped, gets up and gives his speech. And when you hear they were such a close shift that they called the wife of the injured firefighter en route to the hospital, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Is he dead?" I mean, that is,
Wow.
I mean, I get goosebumps right now. But when he tells that story to people, that when you get a call or when you're going to call, we're not even as big as your organization. We probably do about 4,000 runs a year, but we see probably our share of fires. And when you have a group that's that tight, where you have wives' phone numbers or significant others' phone numbers, and you're going to make that call from the ambulance and deal with that kind of, is he dead?
Right.
That's pretty substantial.
Absolutely. I think what the key that I'm hearing here, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal, is that you mean your chief isn't the one going around doing all the talk? I mean,
No, no,
think what
he's
he
supporting
did.
it.
He
Is supporting it.
empowered his people to go and make that change, right?
Yes, sir.
That I think is incredible. Because you talk about buy-in, when these other departments, they see these firefighters that their chief trusts them so much, right? That they're
Mhm.
going to
Yes,
represent
sir.
the department, and they're an open book. They're probably saying this maybe went wrong, but this is how we're recovering. This is how we're doing things right. I think that's that B and the T. That's that
Mhm.
chief. He set these guys up and gave them the opportunity. And I think other departments will see that, and they'll be like, wow,
Yeah, it was,
that department has some
like I
kick-ass
said, it's
leadership.
very progressive. And when I came back from Peoria, I actually gave him one of your keys, and he's got it. He's got it propped up on his desk.
Outstanding.
Um, but then to see these three guys, I've seen the presentation twice, and it's almost like the heads turn to the back to see what the chief's going to say or what he's going to pipe up with, and I'm like, this is not my story. I pick up seeing the three guys busted up in the emergency room. That's where I pick up, and like I said, there is no class that prepares you for that and what you're going to say to people, and doctors, and when family gets there and all that kind of stuff. But I know one of the strongest members of that truck company met me at the front door of the hospital in tears and laid a hug on me that was like,
Wow.
it was breathtaking. One of the most, when I walk away from this career, that's one of the biggest pieces I'll take away from me, because sitting at the coffee table with the coffee, he is the biggest buster that walks by. And he'll kick you when you're down, and if you're in the hospital sick, he'll send you a cactus. But to see this guy busted up like that, it was rough.
I
So
can imagine.
like I said, I appreciate your story. I mean, we had great conversation in Peoria. I'm so glad I stumbled into you and got you out for our chiefs and our people, because we're still talking about stuff you offered that day between you and the Dallas deputy chief DeYoung. When he spoke, I mean, you guys just hit home runs all day long for us.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's unfortunately, it takes a bad thing to happen to make change sometimes, right? And unfortunately, it happened to me. But this is what keeps me going. When I hear you talk, Chief, that you're talking about stuff that I spoke about. I'm hearing these guys go out and they're spreading that word. We're doing something right. We're making a difference. We're changing the fire service for the better. And I think it's inspiring to hear. It's inspiring to hear that I'm inspiring. But that's pretty cool. I appreciate those words.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing that we have any further questions, but I do want to thank you so much for attending today's session. And please remember that this is a week-long event. So tomorrow we are going to go over behavioral health awareness for first responders and navigating resources. Chief, want to thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, just enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.